The biography of Mr. James Horton. My name is James Lamont Horton. I was born October 21st, 1967 at Mount Zion Hospital, San Francisco, California. My mother's name is Arma Mae Horton, and my father's name is James Arthur Horton. My brother's name is Joseph L. Horton, and my sister's name is Frederica Freddie Horton. My infant years were very hard years for my family and I because they were filled with different forms of abuse, mental as well as physical abuse. Our family home, unlike most family homes, was very much a dysfunctional place to have grown up in. At a very young age, I had problems learning how to do things like being able to recite the alphabet, or even being able to sing the alphabet in a song to people like my teacher, mother, or anyone else for that matter, especially to the one person whom I feared the most, my father. Now that I have grown, I now understand the fear of being beaten by my father for not knowing these things contributed greatly to my inability to learn. My father had problems with his own self-being. He projected it in an aggressive manner daily. My sister did not go to the physical abuse like my brother and I, but she did receive the mental abuse for having to watch and listen. This was the time when my sister was very young and she was like a sponge soaking up everything around her. She constantly took notice to everything that was going on. My mother's share of the abuse was the hardest to endure. Physical and mental abuse that went on night and day. My mother has proven to me how much of a woman she is because when the time came, she made a conscious decision to leave my father and get herself and her 3 children out of the situation. My father was not only an abuser to his family, he was an abuser to himself. He was a heroin addict. Around the age of 7 years old, I can recall walking into the bathroom, seeing my father lying unconscious with a syringe in his arm. As time went on, I began to hear rumors in the neighborhood that my father had a drug problem. But at that time, I didn't care what kind of problem my father may have had. I just wanted the rest of my family to be safe and have a life, any kind of life, away from this one. In the year of 1979, my mother met a man by the name of Marvin who ran his own roofing company and was willing to help us in any way he could. During that same year, he moved us to Oakland, and I must say it felt good to finally feel free. Marvin was truly a helper that my family and I will never forget. He was a real man, one of few that I have encountered. But before I continue with my story, I would like to say that I'm very grateful for the number one helper and protector who has always loved me, my God. At the age of 15, I began to let my guards down and allow myself to be influenced by my peers. I believe I was looking for acceptance from the people in my surrounding area. I remember the first time a friend in the group I was hanging out with asked me to smoke some weed with him, and I did just for the sake of fitting in. I could not at that time allow anything to interfere with the statue that I had now built myself up to be. Joining the gang, going to other neighborhoods to fight other youth was another pastime that I also regret. Every time we joined in these types of behavior for no reason at all except to be one of the guys, we felt we had to prove our strength by fighting in numbers. At the age of 16, I sold drugs. I knew my mother would be very upset with me, so I hid this part of my life from her and the rest of my family. I remember when I bought my first car and how I would hide the car around the corner so my family wouldn't see it. I would also hide the clothes I bought, and before going to school, I would change clothes in the car. The influence I allowed the group to have on me began to escalate. It escalated to my first use of drug called cocaine, the same drug I've been selling. Cocaine gave me a more intense high than the weed I had been smoking. It had a different effect on my behavior. I could feel myself changing. I began to feel that my life was in danger and that I needed a change, and not just from using and selling drugs, but also from those influences who I called my friends. I remember telling my mother that I was messing up and having problems that I needed to get out of Oakland. She never asked me what was going on. She was just ready to help me in every way she could. So she called her father, my maternal grandfather, and arranged for me to move to Henderson, Texas. My trip to Texas was truly an ultimate experience for me. The dynamics that were going on in the city of Oakland were totally different to the life I would now live in Texas. My grandfather lived on a farm which was located in a wooded area. Instead of a bathroom, there was an outhouse. There were also hogs, chickens, and possums, which were our daily meals. While going into the kitchen, making myself something to eat, and thought I was eating a piece of chicken, and later became physically ill when I found out I was eating squirrel meat. But aside from the few things that I viewed as abnormal, the experience that I shared with my grandfather are irreplaceable. I learned a lot from my grandfather, and for that, I am truly, truly grateful. After 6 months in Texas with my grandfather and the chickens and hogs, I was ready to go back home to Oakland, California, to my loving family. When I returned home, things were not going well for my family. They were having a lot of financial problems. These problems caused my mother to be forced to file for bankruptcy and barely having any money to buy food. I remember talking to my mother and telling her not to worry and that I was going to get us out of this problem we're in, but that I'm going to have to earn some money in a legal way. I returned to the fastest way I knew how to make money, selling drugs. I was able to get us back on track and even able to become truly tactful selling drugs. I'm referring to it as tactful because success would be an insult to the word. Success has nothing to do with selling drugs. Being tactful comes into play when you did not get caught. At the age of 24, I made a decision to try a new drug. Heroin would now become my drug of choice. Upon my introduction to this new drug, it was a fad to snort it through the nose. I was told that the drug was an aphrodisiac that would make me more of a man and I would gain high points with the ladies. I soon became addicted to the drug and began to use it as I woke up and before I would go to sleep at night. I would also sometimes snort cocaine with the heroin. This was called speedballing. I forgot to mention that I was diagnosed with being an independent diabetic in the year of 1985 when I was 17 years old, which made me get really sick as I continued to use the drug. The drug was more important than taking care of my diabetes. I would go days without taking my medicine due to the fact I was only concerned with getting high. My mood would change. I became prone to going in and out of jail. Violation of probation and possession of drugs was my causes of incarceration. I was in and out of courtrooms. I relatedly became a known visitor. In 1993, I was arrested for possessing a $10 bag of heroin. This arrest ultimately changed the course of my life. I was brought to court to be sentenced by Judge Jenkins, a man who I didn't know at the time would leave his imprint on my life. He eventually introduced me to a program within the walls of the Santa Rita jail, the Deuce program. This was my first grassroots recovery. I completed the program and was released from jail and continued my recovery. As a condition of my probation, I was ordered to show up for court every 60 days for a progress report. Judge Jenkins expressed to the entire courtroom his satisfaction with my progress. Eventually, my good standing would come to an end. I began to slip and use drugs all over again. Earlier in my story, I expressed that I was a diabetic and how it affected my health when I used drugs. During my addiction, I became a patient at High Hospital of Oakland on several occasions, in fact, tried numerous occasions. On one of these occasions, I saw a black man of medium height walking down the hall towards my room. It was an Honorable Judge Jenkins coming to see me. In the year of 1999, I was arrested for a first-degree burglary and was facing 46 years in prison. I was incarcerated for 11 months. I recall writing to my mother and apologizing for all the hurt I had brought upon her, my family, and myself. I was ready to get my life back. On the 11th month of my incarceration, I was scheduled to be released from jail. I remember telling the judge that I was afraid for him to let me go. I asked the judge to send me to a drug program. I told him I had a drug problem and I needed help. 2 days later, after talking to the judge, I was transferred to a behavioral modification program where I stayed for 6 more months. After I left the program, I enrolled in a junior college to pursue a substance abuse degree, and that required me to complete 3 semesters of internship. The 3 semesters became a 20-year job for me, counseling 70 men twice a week at Allen Temple Social Services in Oakland as a domestic violence/substance abuse counselor. In 2003, I graduated from Mary College with 2 degrees and 2 certificates, one in community social services and the other in community social services/substance abuse. During my 20 years of work and service on the job and in the community, I've worked with over 7,000 men and women. About 14 to 15 years ago, Ricky Foster, a very, very close friend of mine, I mean a real friend, over 43 years, gave me the name The Counselor. Thank you again for checking in. Thank you again for watching my biography. Thank you again for watching my story. I would like to close this out and ask you to subscribe to my channel. Push the subscribe button. It's called Domestic Issues with the Counselor, Mr. James Horton. But also in closing, I would like to add to the story to tell you that I had made a promise to God when I was incarcerated, looking at a lot of time, as I had said in the story. I remember telling God if he was to release me, because sometimes there's no human power, there's no person, there's no child, there's no parent that can actually get us out of this thing, this grip of addiction. And so we must call on something that's much more bigger than life. And I called on God, and I remember making somewhat of a deal with God, and I told God if he would release me from the bondage of my addiction, that I would go and help his people. I would go and fulfill the calling of being a counselor. I would help people, even if the people did not like me, even if I felt I didn't like the people. I would help the people anyway, and I would rewrite my obituary and rewrite my life in a more better form. So at the end, when it's all over, when my calling, when my number comes up, they won't have to lie at my funeral. It would be all the truth, and I will be just okay with that. So thank you again for attending my group. Don't forget to subscribe.